I'm Autumn Lockett.
And this is Mitch Randall.
And you're listening to Good Faith Weekly.
Welcome to this week's episode of Good Faith Weekly. And on this episode, we are going to catch up, Autumn and I, as well as take a little deeper dive look at Joe Biden's vice presidential pick, Senator Kamala Harris, as well talk about the environment with Don Gordon, who's the executive director for Christians Caring for Creation. So we're really excited about that interview. Autumn, how are things in your neck of the woods?
Things over here on the east side of Norman are very well. We are T-minus 4 days from having most of our children back in school, which is
amazing. Celebrate.
That's right. My work efficiency is going to get so much better without little blonde babies running through here all the time.
In all seriousness, the schools I know that you're sending your kids, they have really well thought out plans and taking care of all the little ones, of course. So you feel good about the school systems that your kids are in?
Yes, I do. So our two little ones are going to sort of a farm school, nursery school situation where they're outside a lot. Our next oldest is going to, kind of an equally environmental focused sort of school. So they're outside, they're masked. And then our oldest, who's in public school, is actually going to be virtual for the foreseeable future. We don't have an end date on that. So she'll be here at home with us.
Okay, well, good. Well, it sounds like life is going to be changing in the Lockett house over the next week or so.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, good.
What about at your house? What are y'all up to? You just had a celebration, speaking of.
Yes, I just turned 50 years old.
What did you say?
Yes, and I'm just going to admit it that I am leaning into it. I love growing older. I'm fine with it. I'm happy with it. A lot of perks coming with turning, 50, half century. Got my ARP card in the other day. Didn't get me anything, but I am now. I have an application.
Your card carry an old fart.
Well, if they let me in, I'm going to fill out the application. And this is what really suggested to me that I'm really fine with being old. When I got the ARP invitation, I know a lot of people would really be demoralized by that, but I opened it up and I thought, wow, they're giving away a free gift if I apply. And I got excited about the free gift. I'm not going to lie. It was a trunk organizer. You got to see it.
Did it also come with a bag of Werther's Original?
It did. So, just picture it. I could see myself, my little bow tie, my little fedora hat out there, organizing my stuff in my trunk. And then last night,
happy for you.
Yeah, and then last night, Missy and the boys did a little birthday party for me, and I started opening presents, and I just stopped and looked at them, and I said, I'm turning 50, not 80. And
what'd you get? Like a cardigan and a cane?
Almost. They got me a hammock to, relax out in the backyard during this time of pandemic, which was really nice. But then the next thing they got me was a hummingbird feeder. So it's like...
Nice.
It was nice, but it was like, send little old dad to the backyard to relax and watch his birds.
I think it's less about your age and more about our current stage of life, because at 37, I would love a hummingbird feeder out of my office window.
Yeah. Well, the truth of the matter of it, I was really excited about it. So I've already been doing research to the right amount of, sugar water to put in it. So yeah, it's going to be great.
Amazing.
Well, besides me turning 50, other big news happened yesterday. Vice presidential news was afoot. Presumed candidate for the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, announced his running mate, and he is asking Senator Kamala Harris from California to be his vice presidential pick. So what do you think about this?
I'm pumped. I'm really excited about her. First of all, she's an attorney, which I just feel like people in that part of government should probably be. I think it's helpful. I think they know the law in and out in a way that folks who aren't lawyers don't.
Right.
I love that she's a woman. I love that she has, biracial parents. And I'm excited about the work that she's done in California and her bringing her perspective to the White House.
Yeah, and you and I both are reading her most recent book about her life, and she grew up in California, as you mentioned, has biracial parents. She's just an outstanding lawyer, outstanding person. She's actually a Baptist, which I found surprising in all of this, but she does have a faith background, and her faith means a great deal to her. So that's exciting to hear as well.
Does she know how to hold up a Bible?
I don't know. Maybe we need to test that during the debates. Vice President Pence, will you hold this Bible? Senator Harris, would you hold your Bible? Let's see who holds it properly.
And if lightning doesn't strike, then maybe they're a good candidate.
Yeah. What's interesting about this, Autumn? I mean, in all seriousness, you think of course, Vice President Pence, who is a devout Christian, evangelical Christian at that. You have Kamala Harris, who is a devout Christian as well with Baptist roots. And you look at these two individuals who are vowing, one is the vice president, the other one is vowing to replace that person, but applying for the job nonetheless. Both professing Christians, but both so distinct in their belief systems and how those beliefs are applied in the way they see issues and how they address issues from their faith background. It really is kind of an interesting study to see these two individuals stand side by side as the vice president and a candidate for the vice presidency.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there are, a lot of people who think like it doesn't matter who the vice president is, or, they don't really have much to do. But I think it's important. I mean, I think it matters a lot. I think looking at who's on the ticket and, it doesn't mean you have to love every single thing about them. It doesn't mean they have to be your first choice. You're not going to have to go to like the prom with them. But it's more about sort of the overarching values and how you align and the things that they're going to be able to do once they're in office.
Yeah. When the announcement broke yesterday, it was interesting to kind of see the chatter on social media. A lot of our left-leaning friends were very supportive of Biden's choice in Kamala Harris. Some of our far left friends were not that excited about Biden choosing Harris as his VP choice, which I also thought was very interesting. And I saw a post by somebody, and I can't remember who it was, but it was really interesting that when it was kind of talking about the contrast between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, that the Republican Party, when a choice is made, they fall in line. Democrats feel like they've got to fall in love with their candidates.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see that contrast just politically and strategically in both parties. And I think it was pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think it absolutely is, because I remember early in, 2015, when the Republicans had like 47 people on stage during the Republican primary, there were so many people who were just appalled by Trump. And we're really calling him out for, the things that he was saying, for his past. And then all of a sudden, when it started being pretty evident that it was going to be him, they pulled their anyone but Trump signs out and just fell right in line behind him. People who would have never, I thought, voted for him in the past. And I think we've seen them continue to sort of cling to it, even through the roller coaster that we've been on since then.
Yeah, it was fascinating. You're seeing that a little bit in the Democratic primary, even with this choice of Harris. She was very critical of Biden at the beginning and probably had the most effective attack on him during the debates throughout the entire primary. But now, he has extended this invitation to her to become the vice president. In the book, it talks about how close she was with Beau Biden, Joe's son. And Beau unfortunately passed away not too long ago of cancer. But that was interesting to hear their relationship and how that played a part in her accepting the VP nomination. But going back to the Republican Party, during their primary 4 years ago, I mean, Trump could not have been more vile and mean-spirited to his fellow Republicans. And I think about Rubio and Graham and Cruz. And while I have ideological differences with all of them, I thought, my goodness, how do you recover after, saying the things that they did, or he said the things that he did about them. And after he got the nomination, every one of them fell in line and supported him. It was the craziest thing to see. But I guess that's politics. Glad that doesn't happen in the church, right?
I'm excited though, because I feel like she is someone who will call Biden out. Yeah. I think she's already proven that she will. And I don't know that we have that in Mike Pence.
You've seen this throughout different presidencies and probably the most recent has been Obama in getting differing opinions, even people outside their party, in an attempt to create what Doris Kearns Goodwin's talked about in her book about Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, was a team of rivals. That you wanted spirited debate on policy within your cabinet. You wanted other perspectives. You wanted your staff and cabinet to wrestle with these things and to debate these things, knowing that the chief executive would make the final decision. But you wanted to be pressed. You wanted to be pushed on these issues because that's being a good cabinet member.
Yeah.
So, well, the one thing I do hope that Senator Harris pushes Biden on and pushes us all on is taking care of our environment. And up next, Autumn and I sat down with the new executive director of Christians Caring for Creation, Don Gordon, and it is a really, really good interview. Don has some wonderful practical ways of caring for creation and teaching us why, as people of faith, we should care about this most critical issue. So stay tuned for our interview with Don Gordon. Ethics Daily and Nurturing Faith are coming together and joining forces to launch Good Faith Media. Is that not exciting?
I am pumped. I'm so excited. We've been planning this and scheming and dreaming, and it's finally coming to fruition.
Well, we're really excited to roll out the new website, hoping that everybody will get a chance to log on to goodfaithmedia.org starting July the 1st. But there's also something we want to invite a lot of our good friends to be a part of, and that is the Good Faith 50. So, Autumn, tell us a little bit about the Good Faith 50.
The Good Faith 50 is a group of our friends who want to support us. And our goal is to grow our monthly members, so our folks who donate to the mission of Good Faith Media, which is to provide resources and reflection at the intersection of faith and culture through an inclusive Christian lens. We want to invite the people who believe in that mission to become monthly donors. And our goal in July and August is to grow our monthly donors by 50.
That is absolutely awesome. We welcome anybody who wants to be a part of the Good Faith crew in the months of July and August. And all they need to do is go to goodfaithmedia.org, hit the donate button, and then select to become part of the Good Faith 50 and a monthly donor at any level. And we would love to hear from you. And we appreciate, as always, your support. Your contribution helps us publish new articles each and every day. It also helps us produce short documentaries and allows us to cover stories across the country. It helps us publish more books and provide more experiences for more people of faith. We are trying to advance a faith that is inclusive for all, providing justice for all and freedom for all. So make certain you sign up on Good Faith 50 at goodfaithmedia.org. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. And on this episode, we've got a very intriguing guest, Dr. Don Gordon, who is the Executive Director for Christians Caring for Creation. So, Don, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mitch. I'm glad to be here.
Well, let's just go ahead and jump into this. I mean, we're sitting here in the middle of August 2020, which we're not even going to go into what this year has brought to the world. But your organization is really highlighting the importance of Christians being involved in creation care, which we just absolutely love at Good Faith Media. But let's get into this organization. It's a brand new organization, right?
Right. It began this year. We just obtained our 501c3 status from the IRS 2 months ago. We have created our website about 4 months ago and are in the process of creating our board of directors. We have a number of people who have agreed to serve on the board, and we have a few others that are thinking about this and will be sharing that news with me in short order, I'm sure. We also have a scientific consultant from Utah State University who has been working on climate science for over 10 years. His background is physics, but he has focused on climate issues for the last 10 years. And so we're working on bringing in other people to write sermons and Bible studies. So we are on the precipice of doing some significant work in this area.
That's awesome. Now, Don, you have been in pastoral ministry for over 35 years, from what I understand. And
Right.
So now you've launched this organization that deals primarily with creation care for people of faith. Why the switch after 35 years behind the pulpit? Has this issue been nagging at you? Has it been tugging at your heart for some time now?
Yes. I think a big part of it is I became a grandfather. And when I go over and play with my grandson, who is now 1.5 years old, I think about his future and I think about what his parents think about their future. They're in their 30s, they're millennials, and they are understandably very concerned about the future of this planet, providing a sustainable environment for their son. And I know that they are somewhat indicative of many people in that generation. And so I decided that I wanted to spend the next season of my life. I'm hoping that I can give 10 to 15 years of this to this kind of work in a way that can help my grandson and children around the world have a future where there is a more sustainable environment in which they can live.
I love it.
Absolutely. So, I grew up in sort of a fundamentalist background. We just put the fun right in fundamental. And we heard a lot, one of the phrases that I heard a lot is that these liberal Christians, they worship the creation and not the creator. So what would you say to that sort of vernacular?
Right. Well, the one, I don't want to bash my ancestors. I think I remember Will Willimon asking Baptists one time why they hate their parents so much regarding in regards to their theological parents. One of the things that fundamentalists and many Christians ground their faith in is the Bible. And so I am approaching this from a biblical perspective from the very beginning of the Bible. In Genesis chapter 1, humankind is given dominion over the earth. And if you read the rest of the Bible, you find out what a powerful word dominion is. And most often when it's used in Scripture, it's used in a cautionary way because it is so often abused. And the kings of Israel and the religious leaders of Israel were often considered abusing their power, and they were taking care of themselves and exploiting the people rather than serving the people. They were not exercising dominion in a proper way. So the entire scope of Scripture teaches us that dominion is a very servant-oriented word, and we need to be very careful about how we exercise dominion. And in regards to the creation, it means that we don't need to exploit creation and use it just for our own good, but we need to care for it so that we are demonstrating our love and obedience to God, and also practicing good stewardship for future generations. And that's one of the reasons we've been given dominion, is we are co-creators with God to take care of creation.
Don,
So
I think, I'm sorry.
Sort of to summarize the answer is, I think the key for this organization is to make sure that we communicate there is a biblical foundation for this. It's not just a secular foundation. It's not just a scientific foundation, though we do believe it is tied to science. But there's a biblical foundation of this organization.
Mm-hmm. Don, I think you hit it right on the head, this misunderstanding of what it means in that Genesis passage about humanity having dominion over this earth, because it still seems to me that, we get criticized a lot when we talk about creation care and environmental justice at Good Faith Media. But this idea of dominion, do you think that there is still this misconception by many people of faith that just because there are these narratives within the Genesis account that God created humanity, and that somehow God placed humanity at the center of this universe he created, and therefore we reign over it, instead of looking at it as God placing us within the creation, that we are part of this symbiotic ecosystem that works together, and that as being given dominion, that we are caretakers of this creation, and that's a great responsibility given to us by God. And so that seems to speak exactly to what you're saying, that the word dominion has more of a servant practice to it rather than a ruling or reigning practice to it.
Right. I mean, the Hebrew word is radah, and it's so interesting. It's used 27 times in the Old Testament, and almost all of those instances are cautionary instances where those who have dominion are cautioned to be careful about how they exercise it, or they actually are condemned and rebuked for how they have used dominion. But if we take the ultimate example of one who has dominion, that we believe is Jesus Christ, who has dominion over all the earth. He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And we see how he exercised dominion by coming to the earth, being a part of it, condescending himself to be a part of us, and then caring for us, serving us, even to the point of dying for us so that we might reign with him forever in the kingdom of God. So the ultimate expression of this dominion is Jesus Christ. And it is Jesus who told us that we need to care for the poor and be especially mindful of the poor. And so if we're going to follow that model and follow the model of Jesus, we've got to be more servant-oriented in our exercise of dominion.
Man, we got to watch out, Don, because Autumn's about to turn on the Bible geek warning, and the siren will go off because you and I are talking a lot of deep stuff about theology and Bible right now. But that's great. I mean, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, let's kind of get into some of the issues that you're dealing with at C3. What are you and your environmentalists there at C3? What are you working on as far as some of the greatest issues that you see facing our planet right now?
Right. Well, of course, climate change is a big issue, and that is a significant part of what we're doing, but it's not the only issue, because we are attempting to care for all of creation and not just climate change. So we are calling on people for personal and corporate and even political engagement in the world, not political in a partisanship, but recognizing that one of the ways that we exercise our influence and our power is through political processes and through government organizations, not just in the United States, but around the world. So we're calling for people to engage personally in this. For example, just in our own homes, we can reduce the use of plastic. We waste so much plastic that ends up going into the oceans and destroying ecosystems, that if we could just stop using plastic water bottles that are covered in plastic and use one bottle again and again, those little things are a way to personally engage in caring for creation. We can engage corporately by having our businesses and our churches and our organizations become more engaged in recycling processes. And even at the national and global level, we can support efforts to reduce CO2 emissions. The Paris Accord, the Paris Agreement, for example, is one that if we supported, it would be a good step in helping the whole world move toward greater sustainability. So we're encouraging people to do those kinds of things. And we want to also ask businesses and churches and organizations to let us know about what they're doing so that we can highlight and promote best practices. You know, there are churches now that are being built whose electrical grid is being at least supplemented by solar panels and other forms of energy. So we want to promote those kind of best practices, and we want to be a platform for voices from young and old and all kinds of people to let us know what they're doing and what their views are about caring for creation.
So this sounds like it's a very practical organization that is encouraging not only larger advocacy for creation care, but also day-to-day things that we can do to help the planet and to take care of God's creation. And,
right.
And one of the things
it is very personal and pragmatic as well as global. We hope to touch all of those bases.
Excellent.
Do you feel like this is particularly hard for Americans? Because it does cause us a little bit of personal sacrifice. It's not as easy as just throwing everything into the trash can. And why I say
You're
that
taking away our freedoms, Autumn.
Freedoms, bootstraps, all those
our freedoms
things.
to drink water out of a plastic bottle. Come on.
Every single superlative, right? We spent some time in Switzerland, and going from, I grew up in Central Texas, and which is just about as bootstraps as you can get. We went to Switzerland, and the first thing that our host family that lived near us let us know about was how particular they are about recycling. You had a day for compost, you had a day for where they would collect compost, a day where they would collect cardboard, a day where they would collect paper, and then everything else you had to just sort of hoof it all over town. You had to take different colored glass to different places in the park. You had to take milk cartons back to the grocery store. Any plastic bags you had to a specific place, even batteries. I'm just really convicted about how little Americans recycle batteries, which are such a tricky thing to put back into the dump. And, we came back and our family trash situation was completely overhauled because of the way we had just sort of, gotten used to living life that way. So, apart from sending every American family to spend some time in Switzerland, what can we do to take that stigma away?
Right. Well, it is a huge problem, and it is a cultural problem in America, and we are so driven by individualism here that, again, I think that we have missed an important teaching of the Bible, which really talks about the community, and it talks about the body of Christ as the church, and that what the arm does affects the foot and the shoulder, and every part is connected. And I think that's a very important image for us to hold up as the church, that it's not just what's good for me, but it's what's good for the whole body. And we, I think, can translate that into what's good for the common good. You know, in the book of Jeremiah, when the Israelites were sent into exile in Babylon, they were told through the prophet Jeremiah to look and serve the good for that community, the city in which they live. And so this also was played out in Acts chapter 2 in the early church, where the early church was looked upon with awe because they loved one another and they took care of one another, and people were drawn to the church. And so I think that there is a call for us to become more communal in our activity. And so we can do things like little things like taking our own bag to the grocery store rather than having 4 items put in 4 different plastic bags so that we can bring them home and throw them in the trash can. Being more mindful of that, walking to the grocery store, walking as much as we can. And something that's hard for me is I've become aware of my eating habits. And so I'm trying to cut back on eating meat. I'm not a vegetarian, I'm not a pescatarian, but I am aware of how much energy it requires to mass produce all these things. So we can do small things to contribute to the good of the community and the good of the body. And that's a part of what it means to be a Christian and a person of faith.
I love that. I mean, the whole communal element, Don. I mean, man, you're speaking my language. Thanks so much for saying that. You know, I'm often, as I travel around, Don. Well, when I used to travel around a lot before COVID, you know, people would ask me what I thought was the most pressing social justice issue, ethical issue that we were facing as a people. And I always would say the same thing. I think it's climate change. And the reason I say that is because climate change affects so many other facets of our existence. We've got more migrants and immigrants than we've ever had in the history of the world, mainly because it is a battle for resources where there is not any, where there is famine, people are trying to go feed their families. Where there are resources, there are civil wars, internal strifes taking place to control those resources. And so it is affecting so much. And even here in the States, we see it. We see it with droughts. We see it with more alarming hurricanes coming out of the Atlantic. I mean, you know, I'll never forget a couple of years ago when they set the current hurricanes against hurricanes that were coming out of the Atlantic, you know, about 20, 30 years ago, and just the enormity of them in themselves. It's like, wow, I can see that with my own eyes. And then the tornadoes. I mean, Autumn and I live in Tornado Alley here in Norman, Oklahoma. And the storms are intensifying. The tornadoes are getting bigger. Just a couple of years ago, we had the strongest tornado that's ever been recorded in the world. And it was 2 miles long. Now, let me restate that. The tornado was 2 miles in diameter.
That's just incredible.
And the sustained winds, or they're not sustained, but the gust within the tornado reached over 200 miles an hour. They said it was the closest to an EF6 tornado they had ever seen. And there's never been one like that recorded. And so we're seeing the intensity of this. So climate change for me is the number one issue from a social justice standpoint, from an ethical standpoint, that Christians need to be addressing, that some are, but a majority are not. So your organization like C3, working with churches, working with individuals to bring this to the forefront is vitally important. So what can our listeners do? I mean, you already gave us some practical examples of what we can do, but what are some things that we can do to make certain that we are engaged with the community, the larger community, to address this in a meaningful way?
Well, I'll speak at it from a macro perspective and then a micro perspective. Just to follow up on the macro perspective, this organization is trying to follow the model of Jesus, who told us to care for the least of these, our brothers and sisters, to care for all people, but especially those who are marginalized and the poor. And the marginalized and the poor are the ones who are most impacted by these terrible storms. Just last year in the Bahamas, we knew that Hurricane Dorian was going to come down there and destroy the place. And the wealthy people and the people with access could get out and leave, but the poor people didn't have access and they couldn't leave. Right. They're left to save themselves and to try to rebuild their lives. And so we need to be aware of how our actions are affecting the entire globe, especially the poor. But I would say in a more local way, it is to become more engaged and more involved with the poor so that we can see the impact on their lives. I live in Charlotte now, and I live in a community that is very diverse. I've been in my neighborhood recently and met Ethiopians and Eritreans and people from, of course, Honduras and Guatemala and Mexico. And they are all over the place, and we've got to be engaged with them and be aware of their needs. And C3 is an organization that tries to help us not just care for not just care for the environment, but to recognize that all of creation is to be loved by the body of Christ, and the poor are with us. And so we've got to find ways to love the poor and care for the poor. And one of the ways to do that is to be engaged with them personally. And so that's not necessarily, it doesn't seem to be an environmental issue, but it is a creation issue because they are part of God's creation also.
Man, you're hitting it right on the head, and you're preaching now, and you're even meddling to some point, because this love your neighbor, the mandate that Jesus gave us. I mean, we think about that in our missional practices as a people of faith. And, you mentioned a hurricane a while ago, when hurricanes and tornadoes rip through our communities, it's people of faith who are quick to grab hammers and to help clean up and to rebuild and to provide missional support to those who have been devastated. Well, let's just take that a step further and say the house is falling down. And the house is this planet that God created us for us and gave us to sustain, and we need to repair it. This needs to be part of our mission, our missional practices as a people of faith. This fits very well into our missiology as Christians, especially, that this is who we are. This is what we need to be doing.
Right. Well, you mentioned the pandemic at the top of this interview. We're in this terrible pandemic now, but we're going to get out of this. Yeah. I don't know when, but we will move through this, and it will not be consuming our lives as much as it does now. But after this pandemic is over, we're still going to have the greater existential threat to the globe, and that's climate change and the ways that we are exploiting the earth. And so that is the larger issue. And if we're going to truly love God and love our neighbor, then we really need to be involved in this. And we need to do for this what the early Christians did at the beginning of the Christian movement. The Christians overtook the Roman Empire, not by the sword, but by love. The Romans were amazed that the Christians took better care of the orphans of other people than the Romans took care of their own children. The Romans were amazed that these Christians were caring for the sick more than they cared for their own sick. So the Christians overtook the Roman Empire through love by creating orphanages, by creating hospitals, and eventually by creating educational systems and universities. Those were huge problems in the first 500 years of the Christian movement. And the Christians stood up and they answered the call. Well, this is the new call for Christians today. The greatest problem in the world now, I believe, has to do with climate. And Christians, who comprise of 31% of the world's population of 7.3 billion people, have the greatest potential to have a positive effect on this. So if we mobilize and we care for one another, especially the poor, we can do in our time what the early Christians did in overthrowing the Roman Empire.
That's very well said. Well, Don Gordon, Executive Director for Christians Caring for Creation. You can find out more about this organization at christianscaringforcreation.com. But Don, before we let you go, we've got one final question that Autumn asked every one of our guests. So Autumn, take it away.
Yeah, who are you voting for? No, I'm kidding.
Wow. Bah, bah, bah.
You're not going there. So our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So in light of everything that we've just talked about, what is your more to tell?
That there is a very evangelical component to C3, and that is resulting from the vast number of young adults who no longer are interested in the church because the church has been timid or silent on this issue. And their view is, if the church doesn't care about this, why do I need to care about the church? Well, I care about the future of the church, and I care about young adults. And so I want to connect with young adults and show them that the church does care for creation, and caring for creation and caring for God coincide. And we can do that together. And we need all generations to join forces in caring for creation.
Very well said. Thanks, Don. Well, Don, we wish you all the best and hope that Christians Caring for Creation is off to a wonderful start, and keep preaching the gospel, brother.
Okay. Thank you, Mitch. I enjoyed being with you today.
Well, for our listeners, we want to thank you again for tuning in to Good Faith Weekly. As always, we want to wish you a very special weekend, and we hope, as always, that you are practicing good